Good morning to Susan and Skip. I hope you get something out of this. And it is based a little bit on what we talked about last week, but I want you to bring up any questions that you have at the end. I'm going to share my screen. As I said just before you logged on, I'm going to go through it relatively quickly so that the questions which are important to you are what we spend most of our time on. So this can be very simple. You plug in the garage at 110 and you drive. Oh, but wait, you don't get all the versatility of the EV until you know a little bit about what we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to hit share screen, and then I'm going to do the app right here. Share that. And now I can still see us. And now I'm going to hit the little projector. And then I'm going to put this to, okay, I think, can anybody hear okay?
Yes.
All right. All right, this
Yes.
is obviously, let's go in right down into it. So we talked 2 slides last week about the physics. And the important thing here is that when you expend energy is when you're accelerating, not when you're going fast. That has almost nothing to do with it. It's when you accelerate from 0 to 30 or from 60 to 90. That's when you're using the energy. What the electric vehicle does is puts it back in the battery when you slow down, and the gasoline car doesn't do that. And then these formulas are very important for today's talk. That's a concept of power. Most people are familiar with voltage and amperage. Voltage is like the pressure. Amperage is like the size of the pipe. You open it up for a certain period of time, you get more water in a minute than you get in 5 seconds. So the voltage times the amperage is the power. And if you multiply the power times the time, then that's kind of the quantity of energy. Now, here's the 2 ways we're going to use this today. We're going to talk about how fast can our EV charge. One of my friends asked for recommendation on buying an EV this last week, and she's a cellist in the symphony, and not here, but back home. And so she wanted to know which one holds a cello. So I was telling her about that, and she asked about the Subaru Solterra. And I said, it's a very nice car, but it's the slowest charging electric vehicle that's made today. And so you're going to really limit your traveling. The last thing here is we're going to talk about kilowatt hours. That's the size of your battery. I can go for 10 kilowatts for 80 hours. So that's 80 kilowatt hours. And it's also in our range. How much more can I go? How many miles per kilowatt hour am I getting out of that battery? And there's ways we can make it different. All right, here's some acronyms we did last week. Remember, we had an EV and a PEV are the same. All electric vehicles and all PHEVs have plugs, and so together they're PEVs. Battery electric vehicles make no emissions, so they're also called ZEVs. Hopefully you have a basic difference of understanding between alternating current and direct current. And then we're going to use this acronym a lot today, the high voltage battery, and maybe a little bit of low voltage battery. And I'll talk about why there's 2 batteries in a second. And then lastly is this new term, OBCM. That's the onboard charging module. We said last week that every electric vehicle can plug into alternating current, but every single battery is direct current. So we have to have a way of changing the alternating to direct. So every PEV has 2 batteries. It's got a 12-volt battery, just exactly the same as in your car, runs all the lights, seats, etc. It has what's called chassis ground. You can pick up a 12-volt battery, I'm trying to make my fingers here, and it won't hurt you. And you can touch the chassis of your car because it's part of the electric circuit, and it's not grounded because the tires are rubber, but you don't get a shock because it's only 12 volts. But what this battery does is it controls access to this huge battery, which turns the wheels. Now, also, because you don't have a heat from the exhaust, it has to provide all the heating functions. It has to provide the cooling functions because there's no fan from a drive shaft to go around a belt for the air conditioner compressor. And then it has to cool the motor. It also has to be grounded to earth when you're charging it, not to the car, but back to the service panel. And it keeps the low voltage battery charged because we don't have an alternator or generator. So all PEVs are charged with AC, and they all have an onboard charging module. It does 2 things, changes AC to DC and transforms the voltage from 120 or 240 up to 400. Most of the BEVs now have a plug for direct current charging, but very few of the plug-in hybrids do. They're just a different animal. So we're going to talk about this term, electric vehicle supply equipment. That's the piece of equipment that's always in the circuit between the supply of electricity, that's the plug, and the electric vehicle, which also is a plug. So it's a plug at each end of it. And it can be hardwired in your garage. Or when you go to McDonald's, it's hardwired. When you go to a restaurant, a motel, it's hardwired. And then there's a second plug for your vehicle. Now everyone has a supply, a maximum power that EVSE can do. And for a car, the AC max is not the same as a DC. We'll talk about that in 1 second. So what does this equipment do? Well, it determines whether something's plugged in. It checks that it's ground, does like a ground fault circuit interrupter like you have in your bathroom. It does the test. And important for you to know, you're never plugging in a hot plug. When you plug a lamp in the wall, that plug is hot, outlet is hot. And when you plug into it, you could get a little spark, but you try to ground the plug before the other one gets in and touches. But in an electric vehicle, that outlet is always cold until the EVSE tells it to open up. So it checks for the proper grounding. It asks the EV, well, how much power are you going to accept? How much can I give you? It also, that amperage is based on the state of charge of the high voltage battery. If it's very high state of charge, the amperage that I'm allowing the EVSE to give me is low. If my state of charge is low, then I can accept at a faster rate. It also, the EVSE stops the flow of electricity before you disconnect it. Every one of them has a button. When you push that button down, electricity is shut off and you're always unplugging a cold plug. You can plug in the rain, you can plug in the snow, you can plug in a stand in a flood. It's not going to matter. It doesn't hurt it to be rained on while it's charging, but it doesn't allow the charge to start until it finds that in fact there is no short circuit. Now, in some cases, mostly the Tesla, they want to be able to just go and plug in. They don't want to do an app. So that asks the car, what's your VIN number? And then the car tells it, and it looks in its file and says, okay, go ahead and charge. I'll send you the bill. We don't have that for our cars. My car does not take a Tesla plug. Put that in quotes. I'll be right back to it. So there's maximum limitations that both the EV have and also that the EVSE can give. Our maximum AC power is determined by the onboard charging module. How much can you take? The maximum DC is set in a portion of the battery system called the BMS, the battery management. Now, what does the BMS do? Well, obviously, it tells the EVSE, here's the max I can take. I can't take any more. But it also makes sure that every one of the 288 cells in my battery are charged the same amount. So it does battery equalizing. So that's very important for successful non-hot discharges and charging. So even as you're charging, the BMS is saying, oh no, go to this cell, go to this cell. Oh, are you caught up? Okay, go to this cell, and make sure they're all the same. And most of them are about 4.5 volts, and it keeps it within 1/100th of a volt. Now, these are some examples. My Bolt, the max AC power is 7.68 kilowatts. And I'll show you on a slide, what does that mean in terms of how fast you're charging. But my Hyundai that I just got a week ago, the maximum is 11. So I can charge it faster at AC. My old Bolt, the maximum level was 50. When I got my new battery, they upped the maximum power to 55, which made the Subaru Solterra now the slowest charging vehicle at 50. But my car charges at 240 kilowatts, which means 5 times faster. Instead of charging for 2.5 hours, I can charge for half an hour and fill my battery. That's critical, but you also have to pay a little bit more for that capability. Now, the voltage that comes in is mostly 400. So my Hyundai has a transformer. The first thing it does, transforms it up to 800. And then it actually sends it into the battery in 2 different places. So the EV does not tell the EVSE, this is my maximum, but just says, well, right now, under these conditions, the temperature and the state of charge, this is what I'll accept. but the EV knows not to ask for any more than its maximum limit. So my Hyundai will never ask for more than 240. The EV SE also has a maximum. It could be 7, it could be 11, it could be 30, it could be 24, could be 400, but it simply says, it denies the EV. If the EV says, my available is 240, but I plug into a 40 kilowatt charger, I'm only going to get 40. I get the lower of those two numbers. That's important if you're planning a trip. So who set these standards? The Society of Automotive Engineers 20 years ago. They've had electric vehicles since 1809 or about 1809. So what are the standards? What does that mean? Well, it's how high can you drop it and it doesn't break? What temperature does it work in? How long can it be underwater? How does it talk to the vehicle? So these standards set that up. They also said what each one of these pins is going to do that plugs into the car. So it governed the plug pin function, but not its placement. So we have two different plugs that plug into a car. And so United States plugs, as opposed to European plugs and Japanese and Chinese plugs, use this J1772 standard. The other countries don't. So this is the pin pattern for AC charging. And you can see the top two. I don't know, can you see my little arrow? These top two are the current in and out. This is the ground. It's the same size. And these two are the communication. Now, you don't need to know what they're communicating. We'll talk about it briefly, but you don't have to memorize in as much depth as I could tell you, and I'm not going to. So this is the Tesla pattern. Now you see the same pins. There's the two big ones. They're even bigger. There's the ground, there's communication, and there's communication. Now this little thing fits right in that receptacle so tightly that water can't get in it. Well, if you plug it in, how can it plug in? There's air in there. Well, the air comes out this little hole right here. So it goes in these two holes and out here. And that's on the bottom, so rain can't go upwards into it, but it enables you to plug in and unplug without having a suction. It enables this to have a watertight connection. So the Tesla plug does the same ones as the J plug, but it has some extra functions, which we said, like asking the car who you are. Who are you plugging in? The Tesla pin can do that. So it says the Tesla pins number 1 and 2, let's go back 2 slides. These big ones also handle the DC, but in the A, where's the DC here? Well, for low DC, I can use these two, but for the DC currents that I want, it wasn't good enough. So we had to create another plug, which I'll show you in a second. There originally were 2 AC and 2 DC levels. And we didn't have DC level 1. There wasn't in the United States. That was a European standard. But recently, for the school buses and these big semis, they have to charge faster than 400 kilowatts. So now we have a third level, which is not a standard, it's just a recommended practice that allows it to go up to 1,000 kilowatts or a megawatt of charging power. So the EVSE says this is what I can take, and this is it's amperage regulated, changes the amperage, not the voltage. And the EV says, okay, well, you can give me this much now, but in a minute or two, you have to give me less. So I'm going to show you a slide next that we're going to see again and talk about in detail. But this is a typical direct current charging curve, happens to be for the Chevy Bolt. The power, kilowatts, is in red, and the amperage is in blue. And they parallel each other because the voltage stays the same. So what this tells us is that it steps down. It used to, let's just do the blue one. So it went over to here to 50%. It said, I don't want you to get too hot. So it cut down cut down the power. And then when it got out here to this percentage, 70%, it cut it down again. Well, Tesla was able to charge faster because their cars didn't cut down at 50%. They went all the way to 60% out about here. And then what Chevy did, and then the others did catch up. Chevy was the first, said, well, you don't need to step down. You can taper down. So this little square here is bigger than this one, which means in this period of time from here to here, I'm giving more power if I follow the curve rather than if I step down. And that's true all the way to the end. So if we step down slowly, we have more power towards the end. But here at the bottom, this is 10, that's 25 kilowatts and 10 kilowatts. So keep that in mind because we're going to talk about charging at 7.8. which is past this last step down. So here's those 4 levels of charging, 2 AC and 2 DC. Like we said, DC level 1 is not in the United States, and DC level 2 goes up to 400 kilowatts. And I put an asterisk because you can go higher, but the standard only allows 400. Well, let's talk about these 4 levels, or 3 actually. What is AC level 1 charging? Well, you plug into a 120 volt outlet. Now, usually it's going to be on a 15 amp circuit. And if that's the only thing that's plugged in, you can get 12 amps. So I can tell my car, tell it I can take 12, and it's a toggle you switch in the car, and says if there's nothing else in the circuit, because it can only run continuously at 80% of its maximum. So this has got a circuit breaker at 15. I can't run 15 maximum, I can only run 12 maximum, but I can if it's the only thing. If this is a shared circuit, like you got some lamps in the garage or a dryer or something else, an iron, my sister's ironing board was plugged in the same circuit that fed the outlets to the garage. So when I plugged into her garage and said, give me 12, boom, it popped the circuit breaker. I just clicked it down to 8 and we could both do our thing. Now, here's the problem is you're only adding about 4 miles of driving for every hour you're plugged in. And so if you have a 70, if you want to be able to go 250 miles, you're charging for over 2 days. Well, you might say that's stupid. I'm never going to do that. And the answer is right. You never, ever have to. So these are the 2 abbreviations, range miles per charging hour. And then this is the time needed to add 200 miles. 50 hours is more than 2 days. So in the onboard charging module, we convert it to DC. The power is so low that there's no step down needed. And we've not found that charging at this level ever hurts your battery, like charging at the higher levels can. Doesn't always, but can. This is probably a good point to interject that the Nissan Leaf was one of the first EVs, and it air cooled the battery. It said, just use your air conditioning, blow cold air over it. Didn't work. They lost 5% of range every year. In 20 years, no battery. So Tesla in 2012 said, we're going to water cool our battery. And Chevy said, we're going to water cool. And every other vehicle except the Nissan water cools. And our degradation is only about 1%. So the battery would last 100 years. So why do you ever want to use it? Well, if you only drive 50 miles a day round trip, that's called a commuter. And the average American drives 40 miles a day when they're not taking a trip. So every single American, when they're not taking a trip, not everyone, the most part, the majority of them could fill up that 40 miles in an 8-hour overnight or 50 miles in a 10-hour. We can fill it up to top. We can still drive 250. We just can't catch it all back up in one night. What about the airport long-term parking, 72? They don't need to charge you at 100. They can charge you at 120 volts because you're going to be there 72 hours. And as we saw in the last slide, there's no EV that can't be filled to full in 72 hours at level 1 charging. So it's very useful. I did a little questionnaire of my students before I retired. I said, how many of you have cars? They raised your hands. How many of you drive home on the weekends? You know, how many miles do you drive? Oh, I drive to Beckley and back. That's 180 miles or so, more. And I said, well, then when do you use your car again? They said, well, not till Wednesday night. I candy stripe at the hospital and it's only a mile away. And then I don't use it again until Friday. Almost all college students don't use their car during the week. So they have plenty of these 72-hour periods where at 110 volts, they can fill their car again. And it's also when the battery is very cold, it can be fully charged, but won't let go of those electrons. So sometimes we plug into 120, not for any miles whatsoever, just keep my battery a little bit warm. So that when I come and unplug and take off, I can use all the power that's in the battery. All EVs use the same outlets, and there's 2 plugs, a Tesla and a plug-in. We have adapters. I can use theirs, they can use mine. And you can use an extension cord at 110, which you can't at 240. So if your garage, if you park outside and there's a plug, but it's not within the range of the EVSE's cord, then you may have to put an extension cord, and you may do this with 110 volts. So those are an advantage of 110. There's the outlet. Here's my EVSE. This one plugs in the wall. This one plugs in the car. That's that J pattern. And this is the machine that makes all those decisions. And they give that to you when you buy the car. Now, nowadays, when you buy a car, because most people aren't doing this very much. So they're not giving it to you unless you need it. Instead of charging you $300 for this and you get it, I never use it. They say, okay, we'll cut the price down 300. And then if you want one, you buy it. So this many cars now are not giving you this anymore. And that's really an advantage to you because you're not paying for it if you're not going to use it. Now here's AC level 2 charging. And I left this slide in for a reason. It's so busy, you can't read it. But I changed, this wasn't where it originally was. This is what the 50 was the maximum. And then it became 80. And just this last year, it became 90 amps AC charging, 21.6, almost 22 kilowatts. Well, there's only one vehicle, that's the Ford pickup truck that can do this. There's only one vehicle that can be this high, and that's the Tesla. And all the rest of us are down here. So I simplified the slide. I'll come back to that one. And it's right here. So here, if you plug in at 32 amps, you get 25 miles for every hour. I put in a 30 amp myself. After a lot of research, I put in 30. And people said, well, why didn't you put in a 32 or 40? Your car can take 32. I said, well, let's it this way. This one costs $500. This one costs $750. This costs $1,000. My car can't take that. And look at this. What's the difference between 8.3 and 8.0? That's 24 minutes. Why do I need to be charged at 24 minutes after 4 a.m. when I could be totally charged by 5 a.m.? So you always want to put in your garage the slowest EVSE that will fill your battery overnight, because that's all you really care about. 25 miles per hour. I can fill my Chevy Bolt overnight. I can actually fill my Hyundai too. And part of that is you're never empty when you come in, but I could, if I were empty, I could do it. Well, let's go back and look at this then a little bit and talk about this rate of, I'm not going to talk about it here. I just wanted to show it to you again, because at AC level 2, you do get a little step down, but it's only this last step down. After 95% of my battery's filled, I'm going to step down. Otherwise, it's starting over here and staying low until it gets to here, and then it steps down at 95% state of charge when I'm filled. All right, so that's the slide you just saw. Now, there's a certain circumstance. When you look on these maps, it says, oh, this is an AC level 2 charger. But it's not 240 volts. They're not all. A business usually uses 3-phase electricity because they run a lot of motors. And so that's smooth. But the problem is if you tap your 240 off of that, you only get 208. Now, for all of the instruments that need AC voltage, that's plenty. But in the vehicle, the 208 volts at 32 amps only gets you 20 miles. And a lot of them at the car dealers were made for the PHEV, the plug-in hybrid, which its OBCM is only 16 amp. So they said, I don't need to put in an expensive one. I'll do the cheapest one. But you only get 10 miles of driving. So when I bought my car in Maryland and drove it back home, I expected to leave Maryland at 3 in the afternoon, stop in Morgantown for about 4 hours, stop at Mid-State in Flatwoods for about 3 hours, and get home. Didn't work that way. I had to stay overnight each place because instead of 4 hours, it was 10 hours of being plugged in. So you have to watch that. You have to not, just because it's AC level 2 doesn't mean it's going to be higher than 208 volts. 208 is the minimum. And it'll tell you in the maps that we'll see in a minute, but it's a hard work to look. Roberta doesn't want to look those all up, and I understand that. So why do we use AC level 2? Well, this is home charging or destination charging. This is what you get at the hotel, the motel, every Hampton Inn, every state park in West Virginia that has a lodge, most of the bed and breakfasts. And if mine is portable, because 30 amps, I can unplug mine and I can take it with me to the RV park or to the KOA campground, plug in there and charge my vehicle at AC level, 25 miles per hour. This is great for workplace. When Marshall puts in workplace charging, they'll put in AC level 2. So then an 8-hour shift, you'll get assigned one day of the week. This is your day, you can plug in, and there'll probably be 2 shifts a day. And they can buy 1 EVSE and take care of 10 or 11 employees. Because in one 8-hour shift, you're filled. So mine in my garage, I use it once a week for 10 hours maybe. And the rest of the week it sits idle. I could have put it outside and told my neighbors, when you buy a car, you don't need to put one in, but they're so inexpensive now. They're $399 instead of $499. And so you generally don't need, you want to put the convenience of having it in your own garage. But workplace charging is important, especially take a place like Dick's Sporting Goods, that all their kids in there, they live in apartments, they can't charge at home, so they can't have an electric vehicle. But now if Dick's Sporting Goods, or if the mall, which they're going to do, put in a big bank of 20 AC level 2 chargers, first come, first serve, and you pay for it, now that's so convenient. I go to work, I plug in, I start it with my phone. When I get out of my 8-hour shift, my car is filled and I drive for the whole next week. So this is going to be workplace charging is the biggest part of 2023, fleet and workplace charging. It's a retail establishment and you don't pay extra, but you pay for it. If I stay at the lodge, instead of bypassing it and driving, I'm paying $99 for that room. If I pay $110 at Hampton, $5 of that paid for the electricity. So you are paying, but it's included in that because they get a benefit. They get the other $95. So it's always to the establishment's benefit to put in an AC level 2 charger. I was on the phone to Timberline Ski Lodge this week. They have a plug, but I said, pretty soon you're going to want to put in an AC level 2 charger because people come and ski for 4 hours. They don't want to get 20 miles. They want to get 100 miles. So put this in, charge them for the electricity. When you're doing something else is the perfect time to charge. That's why I'm going to show you in a slide here. Let me see if it's the next slide. No, I can charge my car faster than my wife can fill her car with gasoline. And I'll show you why in another slide here. So we get these adapters so that I can use a Tesla plug. Here's the, or no, I'm coming back. I can use their plug and they can use my plug because we have an adapter that goes up to 240 volts. And up until a few months ago, you didn't have any for the DC plugs, which is 3 different plugs. So this is that NEMA 1450. This is what every RV has. And between these two brass line, that's 240 volts. And between each one of these, it's 120. And this is the ground. So in your RV, you have lots of circuits that run 120, and you have 2 hot water heater, and maybe you'd use a microwave. That may be the only thing you run at 240, but you've got 240 right there. So the EVSE, this is the most common plug on an EVSE. Here's my Tesla adapter, Tesla plug pattern here, my plug pattern here. If I go to any place like Blackwater Falls that offers a Tesla plug, I can charge on their plug. Now, whenever I go to Blackwater Falls, I always do that. Well, why do I do it? Because there's 3 Tesla plugs and only 1 with this pattern. What if I plug in at 7 o'clock and go to dinner and go to bed, and some guy comes in at 9 and he doesn't have an adapter? He's got to sit there till late in the morning. So by using the Tesla plug, I'm keeping this one free for the person who doesn't own an adapter. This is what the EVSE looks like on my wall. This is that same cord, J plug. Most charging is done at home, but as we get workplace and apartment charging, that number is going to depend on how you define home. Most of it now is in a garage, but pretty soon there'll be more workplace charging. So this percentage of charging that's done in your garage will go down. And it's gone down from 88 to 85% in the last 3 years. This is what it looks like at a public charge. This is Clipper Creek, 32 amps, 20-foot cord. They have one of these at McDonald's down in Huntington. We have 2 of these at the Marshall parking lot, but it's not by Clipper Creek. It's by a different company. Well, why does it take me less time to charge my EV? It takes me 15 seconds to plug in at night, 15 to unplug in the morning. I do this twice a week. So I spend 1 minute a week or 52 minutes a year charging my vehicle, all my driving. However, the internal combustion engine vehicle owner, like my wife, fills up once, maybe every other week now with COVID. But it takes about 15 minutes to drive to the station, wait in the line to get a pump, arrange your credit card, pump the gas, turn the nozzle back, get your receipt, get your bonus points from Kroger, and then drive back home again. So that's 15 minutes every week, which is 13 hours a year. Now, I know 13 hours is more than 52 minutes. So I'm spending less time charging my vehicle than she spends gassing up. Well, then here's this fast charging. I don't want to go to Flatwoods and plug in for 4 hours to get on to Morgantown. I want to be able to charge faster. So my car has the capability of doing direct current charging. And there's this one level, we don't have it in the United States, put a big X through that. The DC level 2 goes up to 400, and the new, not a standard, the new RP goes up to 1,000. But this is where we're generally going to talk about the rest of the time. This is only for a semi and a school bus. So what is direct current fast charging? Well, all of these levels are faster than AC because the lowest is 24 and 24 is above 22, but some of them are not very fast. So maybe direct current fast charging is not the right term. Well, people said, well, there's AC1, AC2, there's only one DC level. Let's call that 3, but there is no such thing as level 3. And you show your ignorance if you say, I'm going to a level 3 charger. Well, there's no such thing as a level 3 charger. You're going to a DC level 2. But they said, well, there's a 2 in AC and a 2 in D. I'm going to get confused. Well, let's call all these DC fast charge, DCFC. That became within 6 months worthless because 24 kilowatts is not 350. So they're not all fast. So we don't call them level 3. Here's the plug patterns. This is a European Tesla pattern, but I couldn't find an end-on pattern for the Tesla. This is called the CHAdeMO plug, and it was invented in Japan to be able to go both directions. I can put it in the car and I can pull it out of the car. This is called the CCS plug. The top half of it is that AC portion, and those are the DC pins. Now, pretend in this Tesla plug, pretend it's that old one. Those 2 big pins can handle this level of DC, but these 2 pins cannot. These can only handle up to 48, and we don't have in the United States. Usually when you plug in this plug here in the United States, they don't even have metal in these pins. Sometimes they don't even have the plastic there. They're just cut off, so there's not so much friction. So sometimes these pins up here are missing, and it's these pins that are giving me the DC current. So this is that receptacle, and you don't have to memorize all of these except to know that 1 and 2 can do the lower level of DC, and these are the real DC, and then these are the contacts 4 and 5, and this tells you what they tell the vehicle, but you don't need to know. So for these 2 standards, DC level 1 uses pins 1 through 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the DC level 2 uses 3 through 7. Don't get a headache. I'm going to go backwards. It uses this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, but doesn't use 1 and 2. So here's that Tesla. It can do 1 and 2. Both of them up there do the high DC charging as well. So they only have that 1 plug. But up to recently, you didn't have any adapters. Well, what about CHAdeMO? CHAdeMO is a Japanese standard, and they say there's lots of stories out there. I'll tell you my favorite. This is an abbreviation of charge to move, meaning I'm moving with the charge. Well, I don't like that one. I love the second one here, CHAdeMO Ikaga Desuka, which means, actually does mean, how about a cup of tea? Have you got time for a cup of tea? And so they made the CHAdeMO, take that out of that. It's probably not true, but it's a cute story. So it just says, we're going to charge our EV in the time it takes you to have a cup of tea and a breakfast scone. So this DC level 2, there are lots of different EVSEs, level 2 DC, that have a maximum power level of 24, lots at 40, lots at 50, 62, 75. Well, why did I make these in 2 separate piles? There's room up here for more. Well, here's the reason. These are so slow that we like to call those DC slow charging. So since the lowest power for DC level 2, which is 24, we saw that last slide, that's not much better than 21.6. So I started this term myself, and it's just slowly catching on in the United States. We're calling these low power stations the 24, 40s, and 50s. And there was a reason to cut off at 50, which I can show you on another slide, where we call those DCSC. And that way, if we're planning a trip, if the map shows us DCSC in a different color, I don't want to stop there. Or if I can filter out those 3, which is what PlugShare lets us do. So here's the big voltage. It's up to 1,000 volts, 400 kilowatts. The maximum charging rate is dependent upon the max of the EVSE, the max acceptable. I can plug into 150, my Chevy, but it only accepts 55. I'm never going to get more than 55. I can plug into a 40 kilowatt with my Hyundai that can take 220. I'm only going to get 40, the lesser of the 2. And the charging rate is dependent upon the step down pattern. So we talked about this a little bit, but I want to mention one more thing. At one point in time, the EV said to the EVSE, okay, I'm going to step your power down. And the EVSE said, why? And he said, so I don't get too hot. And so the EVSE said, how hot are you? And the car said, you're right, I'm checking my temperature every second. Could I just tell you my temperature? And said, no, I don't even need to tell you that. I'll take my temperature. And if I'm still cold, I'll let you stay at this higher level. So now you're having actual batteries telling the car, this is how warm I am. The car tells the EVSE, you can keep coming in because you can keep this safely higher on a cold winter day than you can on a hot summer day. So why not let the EV tell the EVSE, put that temperature in its equation instead of just state of charge. Here's what's along the bottom. How full is my battery? 10%, 20, 30, whatever. So it's stepped down or tapered down based on the state of charge. And we're now saying, no, yes, but no. Take your temperature and cut me down when you start getting too hot. So someone was starting to do that. So what is this in my Bolt? This is my Bolt. It can charge at 50 kilowatts. That's the old battery. What does that mean? Well, it means in the first 30 minutes, I got 90 miles. And then I got 50, 30. In the last 30 minutes, I got 10 miles. Now, if you're paying for this by the minute, I pay 30 minutes at 10 cents a minute. I pay $3 and get 90 miles. Is a lot better than paying $3 to get 10 miles. That's 30 cents a mile. That's more than gasoline. So almost no one charges up to 100%. Because you're wasting. Now some here in West Virginia, even they're allowed to charge by the kilowatt hour. So now it doesn't matter. Now we're just looking at time. Well, if the time's 2.5 hours, I don't want to wait. I want to get on the road. But if my car charges at 240 kilowatts and I can fill my car in 20 minutes, why not sit there for 20 instead of 18? So the faster charging makes this taper less significant because you don't do it all. You just do for 10 or 20 minutes. Now in a Tesla, if you drive from here to Florida, it'll say, drive to High Point, North Carolina. You won't run out of battery and you need to charge for 11 minutes. Well, why? Because I'm going to get you up to 50%, but I'll still allow you to get the next one. You plugged in your route. You're going to Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm just going to give you enough to get so that you're at the lowest possible charge, highest rate when you get there. So it stair steps these little stops, 17 minutes, 37 minutes, 22 minutes. And almost never, I checked this out yesterday with a Tesla over. He says, I never charge more than a half an hour. And he charges at 220 kilowatts. He said, my Tesla tells me just do 17. I don't even have time to go to the bathroom as an old man and come back in 11 minutes. So you can get a snack, you can charge your car, and when you come back, you're ready to go. Now, my wife and I do that too, but we do it at the meal. We drive to South Charleston, plug in, walk to Applebee's and eat a meal, come back, unplug. And in that period of time, whatever it was, I have enough to get to the next station. I didn't spend a minute charging. I spent that time eating. But now with these fasters, you can do it in a bathroom break. Maybe we'll start calling it restroom charging. So why do you want to use this? This is travel. This is when you go on a long trip and you don't want to wait and get 25 miles an hour. And in the past, you always try to do something useful, eat a meal, walk around the Dick's Sporting Goods store and look for snowshoes or something, take a nap, play a game. The Tesla has built-in video games, and my car has a built-in reclining lounger that I can take a nap in while I'm charging, even though it's only 20 minutes. I can just lie down and take a nap. So, and you don't have to stay with your EV ever. You can leave. The EV will send you a text message and says, I'm full. If you told it only fill to 80%, it gets to 80%, turns off the EVSE and sends you a text message. Now you want to go back and unplug so that somebody else can use it. Well, who cares? I'm still shopping. Ooh, Tesla said if you're more than 15 minutes, we're charging you $1 a minute, $60 for an hour. Everyone gets back and unplugs within that 15 minutes. And now the others are doing that too. The charge point is saying you're going to get an idle fee because you got to get off that plug and let somebody else use it. You try not to arrive at less than 10% because of anxiety. Is that anxiety? I'm not going to get there. No, I can honestly tell you in 7 years, I've never had anxiety that I wouldn't get there. Do I have anxiety? Yes. What is it? That they're going to be broken, or they're all going to be filled by other EVs, or the worst of all, they're blocked by a gasoline car who's just going to be there for 8 hours just to pick you off. And so my anxiety is, oh, well, now I can check the day before and found somebody plugged in and it was working. So I'm hoping it's not going to be broken. I'm hoping it's not going to be blocked, but that's my anxiety. I almost never charge past 80 because it wastes time. And I do safety. I want to be well lit, patrolled maybe, so I'm not in danger behind some Walmart plugging in at the back in the dark. I want convenience, like a restroom. I want a place to eat. And then contingency, what does that mean? Well, how far is the next station? If I go from here to Morgantown and I'm just going to make it, but I get a little nervous, I'll stop in Bridgeport at a 24 kilowatt just for 20 minutes. And that puts about another 20 miles in my car, which is enough of a buffer to reduce the anxiety that I'm going to get there. But some people use DC fast charge when they have no home charging at all. It does hurt their battery, but you can do it. So these are the plugs are not interchangeable. I can't plug into theirs and mine except if I use an adapter. And there wasn't any adapter until about 6 months ago, except for Teslas. They could have a CCS to Tesla. They could park at my station, but I couldn't park at theirs. They could park at a CHAdeMO station plug because they had an adapter. And then about 6 months ago, there was a Tesla to CCS for a supercharger available, but very expensive. And then what happened, I don't think I have in the next slide. Yes, I do. This just happened 2 days ago. So 2 days ago, Tesla, or 3 days ago now, Tesla began deploying what they call a magic dock. A magic dock is at their station. If you just pull the plug out, that's a Tesla plug. I charge my Tesla, I plug it in, it asks my car who I am. I don't have to use a credit card or anything. It's just going to send me a bill. But this magic dock, I have to get on the phone and say, I'm not a Tesla. He said, okay, give me a minute and I'll let you charge. And it is a minute, sometimes 2 minutes, because you're going through the internet. It sends a signal back to the station, says, when you pull that plug out, don't just pull the Tesla plug, pull out the CCS adapter that's attached to it. And that's called a magic dock. The first magic dock was just deployed about 8 days ago in New York. And now they've begun a more widespread. Now, why are they doing this? The Tesla owners are ticked. They say, why could you open that? Well, the Biden administration said they were going to spend money to put high-powered chargers with high reliability every 50 miles across the United States. So people said, I want some of that money. They're going to give me $800,000 to put in $1 million station with 4 plugs. Each plug has to be 150. So everyone's designing a new station with 4 plugs. I have to get 95% reliability. Only Tesla meets that. Nobody else meets it yet. Now, they can meet that, I think, in 2 ways. They can make each station work 97% of the time. But since the requirement is to have 4 stations, why don't you put in a 5th or even a 6th station? And then 95% of the time, at least 4 of those are working. So at least 4, you meet the requirements 95%. But up to now, Tesla wants some of that millions of dollars. They said, hey, we know how to do this. And they said, tough, we're putting these in for the non-Teslas. You're proprietary. And Tesla said, well, what if we make this thing called a magic dock? Would you then let us apply for some of these grants? And they said, heck yes. So there are 85 Tesla plugs in West Virginia. There's only 1 for my vehicle in the entire state. So this will open the door for everyone. I'm going to show you on a map where the Tesla plugs are, and you can see what it's going to do to you when you want to buy a vehicle that's not a Tesla. So what else did the DCFC? There's lots of brands and manufacturers of EVSE, and then lots of networks that set up the billing for them. So ChargePoint might buy an ABB charger. And so ABB just made it. That's the manufacturer. They don't control any of them. They sell them. And so does Siemens. There's lots of others, but the networks control. You go to a ChargePoint network or an Electrify America, and that's who arranges the payment. And you always have to pay for direct current. Always. Well, we talked about this adapter, but when the CHAdeMO adapter was put for the Tesla station limited you to only 50 kilowatts. Well, why? So you don't use it. So you don't block a Tesla from using it. So that the station can buy it up to 250 in version 3. Version 4 is coming out next year. It was announced at stockholders meeting, and I'm not a stockholder, but the meeting's open to the public. So at the meeting 10 days ago, they announced that V4 is being deployed, and that can go up to 1,000 kilowatts. So they're already predicting, there's no cars, but they said, duh, there's going to be cars that can charge at 1,000. So we're going to put in the capability of 1,000 in V4. This is me, that's my ugly mug in Ann Arbor, Michigan. This is at a DC level 2, but a slow one. It only is 400 volts, 100 amps, that's 40 kilowatts. That's one of those slow ones. So it says here I'm at a 43% state of charge, 348 volts, 98 amps, pretty close to those. And I've been there for 27 minutes. But when I get to about 50%, I'm going to unplug. Now, this is the plug that I'm using right there. It's plugged into my car. And this is the CHAdeMO plug. Now, when you have a station like this, they're sharing that electricity. So if somebody comes in and plugs in their CHAdeMO next to me, my rate will drop down. Well, Tesla did that too. It had 2 plugs at every station. And when you came, you were the 5th per the 4 stations, and you were the 5th person that came. Now, whoever station you plugged into, you cut their rate in half. Well, the people said, why me? Why not one of the other guys? And Tesla said, you're right. So now Tesla monitors all of the stations, and if one more person plugs in, it brings everybody down just a little bit instead of one person down by half. So my friend Larry was plugged in at a Tesla station the other day, and he got to 80%, and it sent it a message, and it says, could you please go and plug so that the others can get the full power? So they're not, because he was the 5th one. And so they were sharing that they got the load down from the max. So it sent them a special message. If you can, unplug at 80% so the others will pop back up to a higher level. So this is Ann Arbor, Michigan. Now here's when Volkswagen, as you know, long story, I'll make it short, they cheated on their diesel emissions. They got caught. They had a $900 million penalty. They created a company called Electrify America to put these stations out. That was how they could meet this $900 million penalty. Well, there's none in West Virginia. Why? Because West Virginia University is the one that discovered their cheating. So they said, you're going to get them, but you're going to be the last one in the country to get them. And they don't say that out loud, but it's kind of implied. Why has West Virginia never gotten one when South Dakota has one? Well, this serves you. You're the one that turned us in, so to heck with you. So we don't have any in the state of West Virginia, but it can go up to 350 kilowatts. Now, here's all the networks. The most common ones are ChargePoint, Electrify America, Shell Recharge. It's only over because I had that used to be what was called green lots. And this changes. This slide is no good because probably between a month ago when I made the slide and now there's been another network out there. In fact, there is another network called DC America based here in Huntington. Here's ChargePoint's map. If you got on the map, I didn't make a moving picture, but each one of these circles is the numbers are plugged. The green ones are the ones that are free, and the white ones have somebody plugged in. And as you zoom in on this, let's zoom in on Columbus, Ohio, right there, 412, that's Columbus. So if you zoom in, that's at 9, 10 different locations. Now, each one of those locations gets its own circle when you're close enough that they don't overlap. So you can actually zoom down and see, but this map becomes out of date every week. Here's the Tesla supercharging station. This becomes out of date every day. Now, I tried to go in and change the slide. For some reason, it won't let me change the verbiage I put on this. So I couldn't change the word weekly to daily, but this map changes every day. Now there's a whole route across Canada. But look at that. There's many routes that you're never more than 50 miles away, except West Virginia, and maybe right here, and maybe up in Wyoming. This is the Electrify America. They published this map last year when they finally found 2 routes across that there's a charger every 50 miles. So this route here and this route to Florida are the only 2 at that time. Now there's lots more now, but at that time, and just after this, within a month, they made a route from Miami Beach to Chicago. They filled in the last couple spots and said, okay, now there's one every 50 miles from here to here. But their goal, this is a map that shows where you have to pay by the kilowatt hour, where you have to pay by the minute. West Virginia, we don't even have any. So that's why we're white. We don't charge by the minute. but we don't have any chargers, so you can't get the kilowatt. The blue is where you can get kilowatt hour pricing, which means they have stations and we have no stations. You can't see this very well, but I put it in. All of these little white dots are where there's going to be a future station, and all the black dots are where they have stations. So I'm guessing this route up here, this is just a month old. I'm guessing this route has maybe one every 50 miles. Well, here's the networks. They have a map. So Electrify America has a map, but they only have their stations. They're not going to tell you where the Shell recharge stations are. A ChargePoint has a wonderful map, but only for the ChargePoint stations. So a website called PlugShare was invented 20 years ago for people that say, you can plug in my garage. I'll put it on here. You're driving across, you find me, you plug in 110 and you can go on your trip. So that's called sharing the plug. So then when commercial ones became available, PlugShare is made by the users. I put lots of PlugShare ones in. I put one in at Country Club Apartments just last month, but we have all of them. So here's the PlugShare map. So no matter who made it, who networks it, the green ones are AC and the red or orange ones, brown ones are DC. The problem is there can be Tesla plug. It could be a 350 or it could be a 24. If there's AC here, it could be a 240, could be 110, or it could be just a plug in the wall. That's what Timberline has, a plug in the wall. If you bring your own EVSE, we have an outdoor plug. Well, big deal. So I called them up. I said, very soon you're going to want to put in a level 2 charger. And when you make that decision, call us, the Electric Auto Association. We'll tell you how to do it the cheapest way. Now, what's the cheapest way? Well, I talked to Tanyard Station. Y'all know where that is here in Huntington, when they were just mud. Menards wasn't there, nothing was there. And I said, listen, you're going to have this kind of charging. You don't have to put one charger in, just put the PVC pipe under the pavement so you can run the wire through when the time comes. Said, no, we're not interested. So now when they dig up the blacktop, it's gonna be $10,000 just to run 50 feet. Whereas they could have done it for $4 instead of 10,000 by putting in the pipe when they needed it. Well, let's look at this map again here, because I don't want the Tesla plugs and I don't want the ones that are under 50. None in the whole state. This is all Virginia, Maryland, Virginia. Now there's one in South Charleston, just opened up in January the 1st of this year. It's a 62 kilowatt, happens to be at the Hyundai dealer, but it cost him $200,000 to put it in. So he's charging 87 cents a kilowatt hour, which is a lot. So West Virginia is what we call there's actually apps that show you how to route yourself around West Virginia so you don't have to drive through the state. We put in all these chargers at the state parks and nobody can get to them because there's no way they can get from the edge of the state to Blackwater Falls. So it didn't make any sense to do that except as a marketing tool for a lot of people from other states. For West Virginians, yeah, I can get to Pipe Stem and I can get to Blackwater Falls, I can get to Tiger Lake. But if you're in Columbus, Ohio, you can't get there. So I think that's the last slide. And I thank you very much. I'm going to stop my sharing and let us see each other again. And I got my volume on. So Elizabeth, if you want to moderate whatever, anybody has a question, shout it out. It's 10:55. So if we have 20 minutes worth of questions, that's super.
We have plenty of time. Go ahead, Bert.
What year did you say the electric cars first appeared?
The electric cars first appeared in about 1897. They didn't become popular until about 1908. And one of the reasons, as you saw on the slide last week, Jay Leno driving that Baker Electric in 1909, that was the first car of any kind parked in the White House garage. And it was for his wife who couldn't crank a crank car. And until the electric starter was invented about 1925 or 27, the electric cars were more popular, but they only had lead acid batteries and they only went 20 miles. So they were just beginning that. And that's what, so the electric car has been around, but it was popularized by the Nissan Leaf in about 1998. Well, actually Toyota Prius for a hybrid about 1997, the Nissan Leaf about 2006, and then the Tesla 2012. Okay. And it's the lithium ion battery makes a difference.
Second part to that question, was that first developed in the United States or another country?
United States. But
Okay.
it took off the other countries. China already has a 20% of all their EV sales this last year were electric vehicles. And
Huh.
the European Union passed a law yesterday that after 2035, you can't sell a gasoline car.
Wow.
Who passed that?
A European Union, the EUC. Now, they didn't say you couldn't make it, but they made the restrictions so severe, you know, you can have only 10% emissions. Well, the gasolines are 80% spitting out fumes. 80% of the power in when the gasoline car is lost as heat. So they simply put a restriction on that, and they can make them. No, we didn't restrict them, but you're not allowed to make them. Does that make sense? You're not restricted from making a gasoline car, but it has to meet the emission standards the same as an electric car. And they said, heck with it, we can't do it.
And so the emissions for all these plants to develop electricity are different from the gasoline emissions, I'm assuming?
Oh, hugely different. For one thing, more and more of the power is coming through solar and wind. We're now ahead of coal in West Virginia even, but not by much, 50 to 48 or something. But when power plant burns coal, they scrub that exhaust. So it's not putting all that particulate matter up in the air. When you put in a gasoline car, that's petrol, that's not coal, and they don't scrub the exhaust. Yes, they use a catalytic converter to try to heat it up so hot that it's not quite as poisonous when it comes out. But it's a combination of the environmental impact of a gasoline car, but it's also the expense. If you're driving something that's 20% efficient and you have an alternative to go 95% efficient and do exactly the same thing the gas car can do, you're going to do it.
You know, I'm pretty sold for around town. I mean, I'm like, gosh, I could just plug in at my own house. You know, I kind of like that.
And initial EV sales, even up to now, have primarily been 2-car families that has one electric car and one gasoline.
Mhm.
They've also been people that own garages, because that's the only way you can do it cheaply, plug in your own. You can't do it at this. This is a DC station right here in Virginia, Lexington, Virginia, and that's me. That's my car. This is me. So anyway, but if you plug in at AC, it's still not going to be as cheap as if you do it in your own garage, which is 3 cents a kilowatt hour instead of 47.
So not all the charging stations are free. Is that what we're saying?
None of the DCs are free, and more of the ACs are not free. And part of that is the gasoline car owners say you're not allowed to do it. They
But
tried
still
to
so
pass
much
a
cheaper
law
than the,
in another state that said a grocery store or a motel could not give free electricity unless you give the gasoline car free gasoline.
so, but it's so much cheaper than the price of gas.
Right, but the people selling the gas don't care about that.
Right.
Now, Kroger, if you go to Kroger, you get fuel points of gasoline. And I say to them, well, what are you doing for me? I drive an electric car. And they say nothing. But I said, you wait till we're 50% and then see what you do. They'll put in some chargers in the back and give you maybe free charging. But the gasoline guy says, what are you? No, I'm giving you fuel points. It's okay. He's not, it's costing him, I'm giving him 50 cents to come in and spend $80 of groceries. It's worth it. So they will do something to help the electric car when we're big enough to demand that help. But right now, my wife even says Blackwater Falls should not give you free electricity because they're not giving gasoline to the gas car. I said, you're missing the point. They're charging me in the room. I wouldn't go there unless they're giving me the electricity. So I'm paying them $105 for it, $104.50 for the room and 50 cents for the electricity. I'm paying for it. So she said, well, when you put it that way.
Mhm.
Now, what about the roads? You know, gas taxes. I don't buy any gas. I don't pay any gas taxes. I drive on the same roads you do. Well, West Virginia said, fine, Rick, we're going to charge you $200 more every year than the gasoline car owner because he's paying gasoline tax. We said, that's fair. That's fine. We're happy to do it. Oh, but wait a minute. Don't make it a fixed amount. I go in every year and get an inspection, and that guy certifies by law, this is the odometer reading. Take the odometer reading for 2 years, say, well, Rick, you drove 7,000 miles last year. We're charging you $70 more. Somebody else says, you drove 40,000 miles. you get charged $400 more. So our argument is not that they should charge us for road taxes. We use the roads, we want to pay that road tax, but they're doing it in an unfair manner. And we just want them to be fair. So far, we've gotten nowhere. But it cost me $200 more a year. And you know, if you buy a hybrid like my wife has, it costs her $75 more a year. And we say, why? 100% of her miles are done with gasoline, every single bit of it. They just store some of that energy to use when the gasoline motor is so inefficient that your miles per gallon is going to be, say, I don't care, you're driving a better car, we're going to penalize you by $75. And so they do. And 150 for a plug-in hybrid, or 100 and 200 for a battery extra for your registration.
Does that vary from state to state?
Yes. In fact, some states, and they're funny, I think Colorado says you got to pay more for your registration, right? But they give you a $2,500 credit for buying an electric car from the state coffers. And somebody, that doesn't make any sense at all. Oh yeah, but the gasoline people can't make an argument now. You're paying your road taxes, but we're going to give you 25. Now you don't just get the 2,500 once when you buy the car, but you pay $100 a year more for your registration to pay what you would otherwise have paid as gasoline tax. And so the more efficient the vehicle is, the more they're penalized. I wasn't that good. You got to have some other questions. I must have confused a few of you.
No, I'm kind of getting more clear on this. So I did have another question. So the cost of plugs and adapters, is that like if you buy an adapter to use a Tesla charger, is that a costly piece of equipment?
Yes and no. I bought the adapter when you could only do AC adapters, only available. My Tesla tap cost me $150. Now the price of that's gone down. You can get some now for $90, and you probably do need to do that for all your destination AC charging. But that one for the DC charging, which has been around for about a year, it was over $500.
Is that considered a universal adapter that can be used on any type of?
No, there's no universality of the outlets in the cars. There's just adapters that allow you to change from one plug to a different type of plug and plug into your car, whether it's Japanese or non-Tesla Americans or this. But you don't have, with the Magic Dock, you don't have to buy your own adapter. They're going to fit the adapter at each and every station. Now the Tesla owners are ticked off. They say, you're going to be blocking us. And they said, yeah, but you know, it takes that gasoline guy about 4 or 5 minutes to get the thing going. You can just pull it out and plug in. So quit your griping.
But wouldn't it have been made sense to have it universal, because all gas tanks openings are universal?
But not for initially, they weren't. And when Tesla started this, they said, no, the Tesla owner gets charging for free for the whole rest of your life. And we're not letting anybody that doesn't have a Tesla plug in there. Why should they let them do that? They're not going to. So they have a different plug, and it's always at the same point in the car. The big problem we're having now is these little Tesla plugs, cords are 10 feet long. Only a Tesla can plug in. You can't plug in. My vehicle can situate itself, but I have to park in the wrong parking spot to get my port in the location of that plug. So that's a real problem. But if they can, they're letting I know what I was going to say. The Tesla owners said, I plug into my garage. I never use this. You're giving me something free that I don't want. I don't get it. Would you cut $1,000 off the price of the car? And they said, oh yeah, very fine. So they said, you only buy it if you want it. So even Tesla people now pay for their fast charging so that the people that don't use it are not getting charged it anyway. Now my car, when I bought mine, I get free Electrify America charging, unlimited 30-minute sessions for 2 years. What good does it do me? There's no chargers in West Virginia that are there. So I paid for that in the cost of my car. It wasn't free. I paid for it in my car, and I'm never going to get that money back. So I would rather have said, well, we're going to cut $1,000 off and not going to give you any free charging. No, thank you. I'll only pay for it when I need it. But I paid for it. They're giving it to you. They don't get you anything for free. They're always on the other end. They're charging you. If we have time, I'll show you one more thing if I can. I'm going to go down here and open up. So once you go to a station, you know where it is. Okay, so let me make that one smaller. I'm going to share again. I'm going to share this form right here. And it's a little busy, but the principle is easily seen. So I made this, and it's available to any of you if you'd like it. My wife and I, when we're driving along, let's say we're going to Columbus at 65 miles an hour, and we have a 20-mile buffer. It's 154 miles. We have 174 in the battery. So in 15 minutes, she does another set of readings. She said, your buffer's down to 15. Yeah, it's okay. I don't mind. Your buffer's down to 10. Well, then I'm going to slow down. Now my buffer's 12, 15, 18, 20. So you can get wherever you want to get to, because you can't drive less than 40 on the interstate. But we went to a place in Virginia, that place I showed you charging right here in the picture. That's further than my car can go. But all we did was drive in the right lane at 60 miles an hour with a window cracked, no air conditioning, and we got there with plenty of range to spare. We had 24 miles left when we got there. So you can do it. So this form allows you to kind of keep track. Now, what's this blank page here? Well, over the course of the last few years, let me move our pictures here. How can I get it to come down? Oh, maybe this way. Nope. I can't. Where'd my slider bar go? Oh, there it is. Okay, so if I stopped somewhere in Maryland, I put this data in here and I put it in my navigation. So here's Maryland, here's Michigan, here's Ohio, here's West Virginia. So I've stopped at Hawks Nest State Park. I've stopped at Dutch Miller Kia. Once you do that once, you never have to do it again. So now if I'm going to go to Dayton, Ohio, I look on the route on PlugShare and I say, well, the first stop is going to be in Hillsboro, Ohio. So let's find Ohio. There's Ohio. Columbus. This is alphabetical by city. Oh, there's Hillsboro right there, over here. So it's a DC fast charge, not a DC slow charge. It's going to get me 62 kilowatts. They have 2 plugs. It's a charge point network. And there's the exact address to put into your GPS. And so I put that, I copy and paste. Let's see if I can do it. There we go. Copy. So now when I've done this, I only print out these top 2 pages. I don't print out the rest of it. I did 2-sided printing. The front of it is my buffer chart. The other one is the 5 or 6 stations. And let me pull up, if I may, my Dayton trip, which I've already made. So here's Dayton. I'm going to go 114 miles to Hillsboro, and then 61 miles to Huber Heights and go to lunch with my cousins. And then we're going to another cousin's house. So we're going to do 26 miles to this address in Dayton, Ohio. And then I'm going to go to Yoktangi Park in Chillicothe and then back home again. So all of those places are already in my navigation, my GPS, my Garmin, or in my car, it has navigation built in. That Bolt didn't. So I had to buy a Garmin GPS to use this. But those are all in there already before I ever leave. And in fact, ones that I may not want, I may put 2 or 3. Well, if this one's broken, where am I going to go? So I go back to PlugShare and I said, well, let me add another one on here. And you can see here that in my first leg, my trip odometer will be 0. My miles to go is 175. I expect my range is going to be 275 and my buffer will be 100. Then what affects that? Well, how fast you drive? What do you set? I'm set at 70. What's the outside air temperature? Are you using air conditioning? And what percentage of your power in this last few days were you using to keep the car comfortable? And how much was pushing you down the road? So we don't do it every 15 minutes anymore. We do it about every 30. But this is the second leg of the trip to come back home. I'm going to start at 0. I've got 174 miles to come back home, and I can keep track of that. And I have no doubt now at home, I'm willing to let that buffer be 5 miles. Why? Because I know the charger's available. I know it's working. I know no one has it blocked. So I have no doubt that I'll get home, and I don't have to have an extra buffer to get to the next station. If I get to Hillsboro, I don't need a charge at Hillsboro. If I can get all the way to Huber Heights, fine. But if I charge here, I don't need to charge. If I charge here and it's broken, I can go 26 more miles to this charger in down in Dayton. So this is just what I made. This is called a trip and power form, right down here. Bolt, trip, range and power form, 3rd edition, latest revision, 2923. So, and we're going to Annapolis, Maryland, for a retirement naval ceremony in the end of this month. So I have one of these made up for Annapolis with all the places I'm going to stop, even the AC level 2s overnight. Now, this is no overnight, coming back the same day. But when we go to, let me look down here. When we go to Annapolis, we're going to stop in Berkeley Springs, West Virginia to stay overnight. So I'm going down to West Virginia here, Charleston, West Virginia. And this is, I printed this out before I added the Berkeley Springs. So Berkeley Springs is now on this one. Maybe I can close Dayton to a file. Close. I'll be done in 1 second. So here's my one that we're not going to even use. I'm going to come down to West Virginia and Barbersville. There it is right there, Berkeley Springs. Now that's an AC level 2 for free. And we're going to stay overnight. So I move this. Copy. You can cut it if you want to, but I move it up here. And so now I have all that data on this single sheet of paper. It takes me 15 minutes or less to set this up for a trip to New York or Washington, DC or Detroit. And then I can keep track of how to make sure that I'm going to get to that station. I keep track of this data. What time of day is it? And then let's see if I have a little. Skip a row if you stopped for a significant time or if you charge and re-enter the starting conditions after you charge. Try to have an entry at least every 20 minutes of continuous driving, but start a new row if you get rain, snow, fog, construction delays, or you had to get off the highway, or some significant en route change that might change the slower you drive, the further you can drive. So let me close this now. I don't need to save it. No, don't save it. And I'm going to stop sharing. So anyway, I made that 6 years ago and it's been multiple revisions, but I just sent one to my sister. So she's got all of those in there from Michigan and Ohio already. She doesn't have to look them up. And all she has to do is, and once you plug it into your GPS or your car's navigation, it's there forever. So I don't ever have to redo it again.
Okay.
So having something like that, planning out your trip and just taking a little bit of time to write it down in a way that you can copy it again, or like I said, put it in the GPS. And once it's there, it's always there. And I don't have to do almost any pre-planning now. I just go out and get in the car and go. That's what Roberta wants to do. Other questions, last questions? We're 14 after, we still got a minute. Let me tell you a little bit about next week. Next week, I've worked on a talk on how do you as a family or an individual make this decision? How far ahead of time do you need to gather data? Well, what is it? Why are you doing it? Well, everybody's doing it for money. So do you know how much you spend on gasoline? If you don't, you can't make this decision. So now in addition to buying gas, you got to write down your odometer, write down your gas every time you buy for maybe 3 months. Every day you should write down the odometer reading. So do you know what your average per day? Are you driving 60 miles a day? Different EV choice. Driving 30 miles a day, different set of EV choices. Going to buy a Solterra and just use it around town. Perfect for that. Now, when you go on a longer trip, we use 200 miles as the base because every EV, that's the minimum they go is 200 miles. So I said, if you make any segment a trip more than 200 miles, write that down. And then at the end of the year, say, well, how many? Well, we did twice a year. We went 800 miles to Baltimore and back twice a year. Now I know. And then where are the chargers? The other thing is you're going to get a tax credit, right? Maybe. So they say you're going to get $7,500 off your taxes if you buy an American EV. That sounds great. But if you don't owe $7,500, you don't get $7,500. If you're working in a $30,000 a year job, or you're retired like I am, and you're getting Medicare or you're getting Social Security, and you're only getting, $24,000 a year, then you only owe $6,000 as tax. That's all you get. And we tried to make it with the Biden administration we lobbied to try to say, carry it over for 3 years. So a person who's working hard, but they're only making $36,000 a year, they can buy an EV because they're going to spread that they pay $2,500 in taxes, give it to them off 3 years in a row, and it never went anywhere. So right now, you have to be American. It didn't used to be, you could buy any car, but starting August of last year, when I bought my Hyundai, I got no tax break whatsoever. Whereas if I'd bought an American car, I would have had $7,500 off. Now, as a retired person, most of us are retired, we have what's called a required mandatory distribution. You have to take it out of your IRA. So I look at my IRA and it says you must take out, I don't care what it is, 25,000. Well, if I buy an EV, the Bolt here was 30,000. So I just took 5,000 more out, and then I owed 7,500 in taxes, and then I let that get written off by the tax credit. So as a retired person, you can make your income whatever you want. Just next year, you have to take it out in that 1 year and then get the full tax credit. So I take it out now because I have to, and I just put it into CDs or some other place that I can use it as I need it. But when I'm going to buy a car, I try to take out enough that I owe the amount, but it's no business to do it for a foreign car. Why did I buy a foreign car? It is absolutely the best value out there right now. I did 2 years of research before I bought my Hyundai, and the Ioniq 5 was named best SUV of the year last year, and that includes all the gasoline SUVs. So it is the very, very best for its capabilities. It has level 2 autonomy, so I can take my hands off the wheel and drive down the road. And I do. It has adaptive cruise control. So if the car in front of me slows down, I'll come to a complete stop. I won't hit him. I'll stay within my lane. And mine actually has artificial learning. So when I'm driving down the highway and I see a semi coming to pass me, I don't want to stay in the middle of the lane. So I'll force the car to get over to the right-hand lane a little bit because it's a semi. It learns that. And then when a semi comes and passes me, it'll automatically go to the right-hand side. Or if there's lots of cars coming the other direction and there's a 2-lane highway, and I don't want to be in the middle because one of them is real close to the line. So I go over and hug that right line because the cars are coming. The car learns that, and then after on, we'll apply that. And that's called adaptive smart cruising or something. I can't remember. HDA, driving assist. So what, highway driving assist.
So you take you literally take your hands off the wheel?
Yeah. But I have to touch the wheel every 30 or 60 seconds. And what you do is just rest a finger on it, and it's going to make little turns. And if you're holding it, you're resisting that turn. But then it says, okay, you're holding onto the wheel. So every once in a while, it'll say, put your hands back on the wheel. Now, sometimes I've got my hands firmly on the wheel and it still says that. Why? Because the road was straight. I didn't need to make any adjustment. It says, are you still holding onto the wheel? Yeah, Bubba, and I give it a little jiggle. Okay, I know your hands are there. So yes, it does check. Every vehicle that has a level 2 autonomy has a mechanism of testing driver attentiveness. Some of them look at your eyes.
See, that was what I was that was my next question. How do you not get kind of relaxed and,
That's what you want. You want to be relaxed. You can drive an 800-mile trip with level 2 autonomy and not be nearly as tired as you are doing a 200 trip that doesn't have it.
I mean, relax to the point that you fall asleep.
You don't want to do that. And this will make, if you don't pick up the wheel, it'll make an auditory and wake you up. It'll go ding, 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 wake up. But do you use cruise control? Yes. Do you fall asleep and hit the car in front of you? No. If they stop, are you going to hit them? Yes. Your cruise control. If it's not adaptive, you'll just plow into the back of them. It doesn't care. So
we have adaptive cruise control. And I think that's been one of the best things ever, because when you come up on a car that's a little slower, you don't have to, stop and then have to reset the cruise.
Right.
We have lane departure. If you depart the lane,
it'll warn you.
Warn you. We have city safety. If you get too close to a car, your car will stop.
Me too. And a car that's going across the front, it'll watch with a camera. And if they pull in front of you, it'll put your brakes on.
But I don't know about this. I don't know. I know it's coming, but this hands off the wheel. Oh, that's
well, it's not totally. You're not letting the car drive. You're just letting it do keeping it in the lane. And when you put your turn signal on, it turns that off in a second because hey, you're turning out of the lane. I don't know where you're going, but you're not going. So I turn it off temporarily, and then when I'm back in, and it shows me that I see a lane marker on each side. If it doesn't see them on both sides, you can't do this. So the little steering wheel is white if it says, well, I'm ready, but I'm not, I haven't taken over control. And then when it turns green, it says you can take your hands off a little bit because I see the road very clearly. I know that's very accurate. The Hyundai within inches, it keeps, and the Volvo too, keeps right in the center of the road, and the Tesla too.
Do we have any other comments, Susan? I see you. Good morning. Jack, ready? Any comments? Questions?
Yeah, Tom was here too. We both were very interested.
On.
Yeah, he just had to go in the other room to take a call. With all the restrictions, or it sounds like difficulties in West Virginia, how are the sales of cars in West Virginia with no brakes, no charging stations?
Yeah.
Um,
Well, you know, it's against the law to sell a Tesla in West Virginia. They passed a law that you can't sell one here. But there are bridges across the Ohio River. They didn't realize that, but almost every person buys a Tesla, and there's 85 Tesla plugs. So Teslas are 90% of the EVs in West Virginia are Teslas. That's not true.
Interesting.
It's 70% for the whole nation of all EVs, and no other EV manufacturer has more than 5%. So there's 70% to 5%.
Wow.
But so there's lots of Teslas, there's lots of Tesla plugs. And like I said, this is my Hyundai is the first one in Huntington. It's about the second one, I think, registered, or maybe the fourth in the state. My Bolt was the fourth Bolt in the state. But you just have to learn how to, we're all praying for the time when we can do long travel easier. But
Mhm.
at my age, is it safe for me to drive 8.5 hours and then have another 20-minute charge? No, it's not safe. So my wife says, I don't want to get up at 6 in the morning and leave. Could we leave at noon and just drive to Blackwater Falls? We'll get there in time for a nice supper. We'll do a little geocaching. We'll do some Pokemoning. We'll get a good night's sleep. And the next morning we're filled. And now we can get all the way to Maryland. We usually stop at the Sheets in Stevens City and just get some charge there because we can. And then we can just go anywhere we want to within Maryland. The whole time we're there visiting my grandchildren, we're within a charger within 10 miles everywhere in the whole state, just about. And then we come back. So it's only within West Virginia. You have to worry about that. So now the Tesla, the charger that's at South Charleston, I did an experiment the other day. I filled to full and I drove to South Charleston. That's 44 miles. Well, I have 270-mile range. I'm only down about, 89%. So I plugged in. It took an hour to fill the car. So I'm never, ever going to do that. Somebody said, well, that's useless to you. I said, no, I got to come back home. So when I'm in Morgantown or wherever I am with my last charge, I don't have enough to get home, but I have enough to get to South Charleston. Now my state of charge is going to be 10%, 11%. In 11 minutes, I get enough to drive to Huntington, or maybe less, maybe 7 minutes. So you just have to learn how to
You
do
plan
it.
differently, don't you?
Gallipolis and between here and Columbus, there used to be no chargers. And now if you go the Portsmouth Chillicothe route, there's one in Chillicothe. And if you go the Gallipolis, Athens, Lancaster route, there's one every 50 miles. The kind that my car can use. So, and you pay for it, but it's worth it. The one place in Lancaster is within walking distance of the best bakery you ever went to. So I walk over, I have a cup of coffee, decaf coffee, and a blueberry scone. And by the time I'm done and I walk back, I don't even spend a half an hour, but I've got enough that I can get safely to wherever I want to get in Columbus and still have a 50-mile buffer. So it's just, it's just
Great.
a little bit different, but it's very easily adaptable, as seen by the fact that we went from 1% sales to 2 to 5, and now this year it's going to be 10% of all vehicle sales will be. And every vehicle, gasoline vehicle, has seen a decrease in their sales in the last year. Everyone.
Thank you so much. I hope to see you next week.
Yeah, look forward to it. Thank you, Elizabeth, for the invitation.
You're welcome. Any other comments?
Dr. Walker, our daughter lives in Richwood. Do you see the possibility of her possibly having an electric vehicle in her lifetime? She's
Oh, yeah.
49 years old.
I talked to the mayor of Richwood about a month ago and the city manager, and they have chargers in Richwood
Oh, okay.
already. And they have them in Marlinton, and they have them at the Cass Railroad, and they have them at the Radio Astronomy Observatory. They have it at Ansted, which is Hawks Nest. So you can get from here to Richwood, no trouble at all. So you can get from Richwood back to Charleston. The problem is, if you're just visiting locally, you're fine. If you're within 50 miles of your house, there's a charger. You don't even have to put one in your garage. There's 2 of them right there in the City Hall parking lot at Richwood. But if you want to go for a longer trip, like over to, and Richwood's great because I can get from Richwood to Interstate 81 on a single charge. I can't get from Huntington to Interstate 81 on a single charge.
And yet Richwood has no grocery store and no bank.
but they've got electric chargers. White Silver Springs has 7 or 8 of them.
Okay.
So they're coming. They're coming. Let's see, there's one note here in the chat. Well, thank you, Roberta. I appreciate your comment. All righty, well, we're down to 5 and I will head out, and I look forward to seeing your faces next week and ask whatever questions you have about what information do I need to gather to make this, make it a right decision. We don't, in our electric auto association, we do not want everybody electric vehicle, buy one. We don't. But we want every person who buys one to never regret the decision. So they have to do eyes open. This is the adjustments. I practiced a little while. Yeah, Rick, can I borrow your list of all of the chargers in West Virginia? Yeah, sure, you can have it.
Yeah, if you want to send that, that trip sheet to us, your trip and power form, I can send it out to, you can send it to me, I'll send it out to everyone.
if
That'd be
you
handy
don't
to
have an
have.
EV, you probably don't need one, and you can
Yeah.
put a piece of paper, but you don't need to with gasoline. But if you have an EV, in fact, most of those columns are going to be worthless unless you have an EV, because you can't put down.
That's what I'm saying for those of us who are
Power.
thinking of getting an
If
EV.
you're thinking of getting one, yeah, sure, happy
Okay.
to.
All right. Well, thanks everyone, and we'll see you next Friday. Have a great,
Thank you.
great weekend.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Dr. Walker.